Hey there you guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some holiday plants, some Christmas plants, some plants of the season that you can't help but see as you're passing them by in the grocery stores, in the garden centers, in the big box stores. It doesn't matter. They're going to be everywhere. Some of them are going to be more common than others, like this poinsettia, and then there's other ones that maybe aren't so common, but when I see them, they're always sold at this time of year, and they add to an arrangement if you're making a little grouping. So anyway, this isn't just a video on telling you what they are because you probably have seen them before, but a little bit of aftercare as well. So first off, we might as well start with the poinsettia because it's everywhere. This one is Euphorbia pulcherrima. I'm never good with Latin names. So this one here is the common one. It wants well, not really bright light. It wants bright light. It's native to Mexico, and it turns into a big tree. Not a big tree, a large shrub. I think they can get to be like 20 feet tall. I've seen photos of them in the second story of homes. Well, not in the second story of homes, but up to the second story growing outside. Bill, this video is getting weird. Yeah, so they can get big. So it just tells you that they're not necessarily an understory plant. They do well with lots of light, full exposure if you can. But if you're just growing these just over the season and you're not looking to keep them past Christmas, that's okay. They can go almost anywhere. Give them a little bit of light and make sure that they stay moist, but not soaking wet. So make sure that if you have that wrapping, let me see in here. I think I have the wrapping in this one. So if you get this beautiful decorative pot cover for it, just make sure that it's not swimming in water. So take it out of this from time to time when you're watering, just to make sure that the water is dumped out. You want to make sure that the soil is damp but not soggy. And just let the top maybe inch or two dry out before watering again, and let it soak in the water and then drain out any excess. You don't want it sitting in water. Root rot is a big thing for these guys, but if you buy them late enough in the season, they should last through Christmas and into New Year's with no problem. But if you want to have success, you want to give them good light. Bright indirect or bright light is great, depending on your climate, and yeah, water them as they need it, and it's not necessary to fertilize these as they're in flower. These red leaves, wow, my voice just cracked. These red leaves are not actually flowers, or these red flowers are not actually flowers, they're actually bracts, they're colored leaves. The flowers are the little yellow bits on the inside, which the center of the flower, that's actual flower. So that's really interesting. So aftercare, it is normal for these to lose their leaves in the dead of winter, and so don't be worried if they end up losing everything. As long as the stems stay green, you're good. Just keep it a little bit drier, but not completely dry if it loses all of its leaves. And then say in mid to late February, cut the stems back, maybe by half or even 1/3, and it should promote some branching. And then once the leaves start to come out again, you can increase the watering a little bit. And just like before, you want to maintain a constant moistness, not soggy, and let it dry down maybe an inch or two on the surface of the soil before you water again. You want to keep these plants warm, so you don't want to have them near a door that keeps opening and closing if it's cold outside. If you're living in a warm area, don't worry about it. But if you live in a place with forced air, or like either a cold draft or heat vents or something like that that's going to get extremely hot or extremely cool, just kind of keep them away from that. They'll probably drop their leaves prematurely. But other than that, they're pretty easy to care for as long as you don't keep them too wet or too dry. They're a Goldilocks plant. So that is the poinsettia. There's so many different varieties of poinsettia. I got this beautiful variegated one that I've shown in the past, and it's lovely. And there's other varieties. There's Poinsettia, which is like a hot pink and a light pink and a white. But they're really great for smaller pot sizes. The plant looks nicer in a smaller size than like with these guys. The typical ones, the bigger the plant, the better it looks. But with the Poinsettias, you can get a 4-inch pot that looks beautiful. Perfect for a side table. Hopefully I put in some photos of those. I've got a tiny one that I bought in a 2.5-inch pot, and that's probably what I'll show you. And it's amazing how beautiful they look. So now we're going to talk about Amaryllis. Amaryllis is a lovely bulb. It's also a hippeastrum. If you ask people about it, the experts, they'll say these aren't Amaryllis, these are hippeastrum. They're kind of interchangeable in the garden center. You might find them as hippeastrum, you'll probably find them as Amaryllis, so it is what it is. It might not be completely correct, but that's what you're going to find it as. I don't have any of these in bloom yet, but I have a lot downstairs. They're all dormant, and yeah, so these guys here, when you pot them up, if you buy one that's bare root like this, you want to give it probably at least an 8-inch size pot if your bulb is the size of this one. An 8-inch size pot is probably perfect. Make sure that there's drainage in it. If it's still dormant, why am I showing you there? If it's still dormant, you want to just give it a little bit of a drink to kind of activate it, but you don't want to keep it wet or moist. You want it to dry out between waterings until you start to see growth start to happen. If it's a flower spike, and hopefully it's a flower spike, you still want to keep it on the dry side for the flower spike because it's not actively growing at that point. It seems like it is, but the flower is something that it can produce while it's dormant and without roots. So you don't want to rot the bulb out. When you want to start watering, keeping it evenly moist is when the leaves start actively growing. And at that point, usually that's after the flowers have completed. At that point you can start into a fertilizing regimen. And then I like to grow my Amaryllis outside over the summertime. I give them a part sun location. I want to protect them from midday sun. And I water them and feed them just like a normal garden plant outside. I usually use Miracle-Gro, and I have the attachment that connects to the hose, and I'm just watering everything. I'm not really particular about anything, and I grow these outside until usually August. And then they're not cold hardy, so if you live in a cold climate, you got to keep them inside as a houseplant until they can go outside. let me just put that there. So I bring them in around August, middle of August, end of August, and I force them into dormancy, or in a perfect world, that's what I do. Many times I leave them in the pots of soil, and I just, you can tip them on their side so they don't get any excess water in them, or if they're in the house, they're not going to get water from nature. So you'll just put them in a cool, dark spot. A fridge isn't necessary. I've never needed to use a fridge. Some people say it needs to go down to about 4 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. That's pretty close to freezing. But I have never had to do that. They do just fine in my 15 to 20 degree basement Celsius. And they bloom after maybe a 3 or 4 month dormancy of being dry and dark. I go down and I check them, and I see if there's any buds starting to develop, and then Bob's your uncle. And you should be able to pot it up and enjoy the flowers. So yeah, that is Amaryllis. Such a beautiful plant. The flower is striking. It's huge. It's amazing. And yeah, bright indirect light is best. Actually, the brighter the better when it's in the house. If it doesn't get enough light, the leaves are very strap-like, and they flop, and then they look terrible. But if you give them enough light, they're very sturdy, and they're just a very stately plant. Kind of resembling a clivia, if you're familiar with clivia. So that is the Amaryllis, and what are we going to talk about next? It is not on my list, but because I forgot, the Norfolk Island Pine. This is a beauty. This is one that if you live in the tropical area, you can use this as a Christmas tree and throw some lights on it, throw some ornaments on it. The only problem that I feel with this one is that I don't know that it, if you cut it, it will branch out and give you more growth. I think that it just grows in tiers, and then once it hits the ceiling, I think it's done. But I don't know. If you have a Norfolk Island Pine and you pruned it, let me know what happens. but these guys, I fear that they're good for 10 or 15 or 20 years, however long it takes to get to your ceiling. I feel like you have to get a new one. But these guys in my area, for the first while, I had a hard time growing them. They would crisp up and they just didn't do well. So these guys here, I like to water it thoroughly and then let it dry out almost completely. This one's in a plastic pot so I can feel how heavy it is. This one's actually in a self-watering container, which I'm going to take it out of this. I don't like this particular pot because there's no way to drain any excess water away. It has the reservoir on the bottom and it has a thing telling me that there's enough water, but if I put too much water in it, I've got to somehow try to drain it out. It's not cool. Yeah, this is Norfolk Island pine. It likes to be relatively humid. Average home humidity is fine. This area that it's in is 40 to 60% humidity at any given time. I don't believe it goes under 40. And you don't want to keep it near a heat register if you have forced air. You don't want it near that. It will crisp up. They're very easy to crisp, and you'll know when they start to get crispy because right now it's soft, it feels soft. Once it starts to dry out, it gets really prickly and it hurts. So just feel the plant from time to time and see if it's still doing well. And it likes to be in bright indirect light. I'm sure it could take full sun if you acclimate it to that, because in the wild they get big and they're not going to be an understory plant for very long. So yeah, bright indirect or bright, depending on your climate. And yeah, this is such a beautiful one. Again, you can hang some ornaments on there. You could get the strings of mini lights and decorate it up. And it's such a beautiful plant. I love it. And the best is if you have a second floor viewing area down into the main floor of the house. So 2-story space. If you look down on this one's not a good example, but when it starts to get 4 or 5 branches, it looks like snowflakes. It's so pretty looking straight down on it. It's just a beautiful structure on this plant. So let's hope that this one starts producing more branching. So next on the list, I don't have it here, so we'll put some photos up, is cyclamen. Cyclamen's a really fun one. I used to grow cyclamen at a production greenhouse many years ago, and they were such an interesting plant. They've got a cool flower that is inside out. It kind of opens and then the petals fold backwards onto themselves. So they look upright, but they're actually flipped inside out. So that's really an interesting plant. They like bright indirect light. They actually like cooler climates. So if you have a particularly warm room, let's say above 70 degrees, you might notice it decline a little bit. But I think up until about 75, you should be okay. But it really wants between, here I am flipping between Celsius and Fahrenheit. It wants to be between 68 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius for optimum growing, and then it wants to cool down at night. I believe it likes to be about 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the low end. So what's that, around 10 degrees Celsius at night on the low end. So between 10 Celsius and 20 degrees Celsius is a nice little window. Or what is that, 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you go above that, it starts to go dormant, and that's okay. If they are spring and winter plants, that's cool. They're actually a bulb. So what happens with these guys is after they finish flowering, they want to go dormant. So you'll notice when the flowering starts to finish, you're going to notice the leaves start to decline, and don't give it more water just because you think that it needs more water to bring it back to life. Let it lean into the dormancy. Let it go more on the dry side. Still give it a drink until the leaves are kind of gone, but let it dry out more between waterings. And once the leaves are almost all done, keep it completely dry. Give it a couple of months dormancy. So for most of us, that's going to be the summer months. It's going to want to go dormant. And then in the fall, you can pull it back out, give it a little bit of drink, and you'll probably notice that it's starting to grow some new leaves. At that point, that's cool. And so yeah, you want to keep them evenly moist. Water it only when the surface starts to become dry. It's another one of those ones that they don't want to sit in water. They will rot, but they like to be evenly moist. Water from below if possible, because with the corm on top, there's a little bit of a divot, and rot is a real big issue. Kind of like a tuberous begonia, if you're familiar with a tuberous begonia. And once you're done with the dormancy, if you keep it that long, when you pull it out of dormancy, it's probably a good idea to soak the soil in the pot and check out the corm to see if it's in need of a repot. It might need a refresh, or it might need a bigger pot. You never know. And yeah, then you can start off to the races again. But they're such a cool flower. Around this season, there's a lot of whites and reds. Some of the pinks are kind of cool too for a pop of festive color. But I'm more versed to the red and the white. They're so beautiful. The next one we are going to talk about is the lemon cypress. I don't have this one on me either, but this one's a fun one. Usually you see these ones wrapped in some sort of little garland and a big ornament on the top, and they call them a Grinch Christmas tree. They're so cute. They come in the lemon and just the regular green. So the lemon cypress is going to be the lemony, the yellowy color, and then there's the just the regular green cypress. And they're so cool. What is it? It's Cypress macrocarpa. I've got it written down right here. I can't remember these. It really likes cooler temperatures when inside, which many of the evergreens do. Like it cooler. They tend to, especially the ones that are lower in the zones. I believe that these ones are zone 7. I kept the green ones alive in zone 6B in my garden. And it grew into a beautiful little shrub. So if you live 6B and up, you can try it as a garden shrub. Why not? Why not? So in the house, it's prone to getting dry tips and stuff. So keep it on the cooler side. Give it bright indirect light, or even bright light if you have it. But bright indirect is good. The yellow one for sure, or the lemon one for sure has a citrusy smell to the foliage if you kind of crush it in your fingers. I'm not sure if the green one does. I didn't try that with the green one. And it likes moist soil, so it doesn't want to dry out completely, but it doesn't want to be sitting in water. It's a common theme. So you want to have a really well draining soil, and you want to keep it well watered. So then you're going to wait for the couple of inches of the soil to dry out, and then you're going to take it to the sink if you can. Give it a good spray down in the pot, and then let it drain off completely. Or you could just put it in a dish of water or something. Let it soak up what it needs to soak up, and then put it back in its situation. These guys, because they're evergreens, that's kind of a telltale that it needs more of an acid environment for its soil, for its roots. So in nature, they drop their needles, and then their needles acidify the soil. But when you're growing them as a houseplant, you don't typically have the leaf litter and stuff that you would have outside. So with that, you'll need an acid fertilizer, or use some peat moss. Peat moss usually buffers the soil to around 5.5. Well, that's the acidity level of peat moss. But when you're mixing with other things, it kind of buffers it down for a more acid environment, which is going to be very helpful for these guys. Peat moss holds on to a lot of moisture, so you're going to want to make sure to add a lot of drainage, whether it's pumice or perlite or whatever. You'll want to add some of that in to really increase the airflow and drainage to your plant. So this one is a great houseplant over the season, but again, I really prefer it as an outdoor shrub. You might be able to put it in a pot outside and grow it through as a container plant, and then if it's still of a reasonable size, you might be able to move it back in for the winter season. Next on the list is Christmas cactus. How can I put this so low in the list? Oh my god. It's a Schlumbergia. So Christmas cactus. So many of you have seen Christmas cactus. Many of you already have Christmas cactus. And they're such a cool plant. They're a forest cactus or an epiphytic cactus. So it's not, I wouldn't group it in the same group as the desert cactus. Well, they're certainly not. These guys like a higher humidity. They like to be evenly moist, drying down slightly between waterings, but they like the dampness, again, not sitting in water. So they're going to like, because they're epiphytes, they're going to like a nice chunky soil, a nice airy mix. they live up in trees. They live wherever they want, really. So these guys like bright and direct light. I think I said that. A cactus soil is probably a good mix for it. It drains freely. If you want to add some strings of sphagnum moss or something in there to add a little bit of cushion in there and a little bit of moisture retention, that's probably a nice thing to do. You'll water this, I think I've already said this too, you'll water the plant as it starts to approach dryness. So it doesn't want to dry out completely, but it doesn't want to stay constantly moist either. And then this is a fun one. These guys, many of you that are experts probably put your plant outside over the summertime, and they like a little bit of a chill in order to produce their buds. So sometimes it's the day length that helps them produce their buds. So as the days get shorter in the fall, they start to produce. But it's also the cooler weather. So when it gets down to around 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, don't let them go much below that because that could harm them. But that helps them set their buds. So if you keep your home cooler below 70 degrees, many of you do. I don't like my house below 72, I get really chilly. But if you can keep your house cooler, these will flower probably almost continuously through the winter months as it's cooler out. So that's kind of fun. So many of my friends say that their Christmas cactus really never stops blooming in the house, but that's because they keep it cool. So that's an interesting thing. So Christmas cactus, always fun. I have not grown one in a while. For whatever reason, I have a hard time with them. I think I let them dry too much, and then I water them and keep them too moist. So that intense wet and dry, they don't like that. So they like to be really maintained. You can water them maybe every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever it takes, but stay on a schedule. I forget about mine all the time. So I will get another one eventually, just not right now. And last thing on this list, I've grown this in the past, and it's a really fun one, and that's the frosty fern. I don't have one on hand, but I'll show you some photos of frosty fern. They're so cool, and I love these ones. They're not so much a Christmas plant, but they are something that is added to many arrangements, and the frostiness at the tips of the leaves, or would you even call them leaves? What would you call them? Fronds? I don't know. They're not actually a fern. They're not a club moss. They're a spike moss. So what is this one? It's Salaginella crosseana. I wrote it down. Crosseana, but Salaginella. So that's in the same family as the Rose of Jericho, or what do they call that? The one that curls up and then reopens when it gets water. Oh, it looks like tumbleweed. Usually those ones, when you buy them in the garden center, if they're all dried up, they're probably already dead. But in nature, that's what they do. When there's no water, they curl up and conserve their moisture. But I'm digressing. That is not the frosty fern. The frosty fern is more of a terrarium plant. It doesn't want to dry out. It really protests getting dry, and it's a terrarium plant in that it needs 70% and up humidity to do well. So if you can make yourself a little bowl garden where it's kind of sunken in, and I've done that in the past. Maybe I'll post something up in the top. If I can find the video, check out the cards if I can find it. Where I planted it in a bowl, and it was so pretty. It lasted for 2 years, I think, in that little bowl, until I started to forget about it and it dried up. So yeah, 70% humidity. It likes moisture, but it doesn't like to stand in water. So that's the common theme for all of these plants, I think. But with the Salaginella, it's kind of more so because it needs the higher humidity, which most of the other plants did not need something so high. It likes bright indirect light, but it will also grow in lower light conditions as well. Not in a dark room, but it does do well in lower conditions. And the temperatures for these, between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, what is that in Celsius? I'm not sure. 15 to 27, I wrote down. So it likes average home environments. So like if you get that dip at night, I know that we turn our thermostat down at night, and then it goes back up through the day. So that's very much like our average home environment between summer and winter. So as long as you can keep the 70% humidity, this is probably a really cool plant to grow. It's such a fun looking thing. And yeah, if you can keep it alive, more power to you, and it's such a fun one. Like, look at it. Oh my gosh. So those are the holiday plants that I have set up or put aside to make this list. Let me know if there's some other ones that really strike a chord with you that I didn't mention. I'd love to know what some of your favorite holiday plants are. And it doesn't necessarily need to be Christmas. Maybe it's a different season. Whatever. But I'd love to know what it is that that you like to bring in your home for those festive times. And yeah, until next time, you guys, happy growing!